This series certainly has a few problems: bad writing, bad CGI, bad acting, bad fight scenes, incoherent contrived scenarios, and let's not forget, destruction of canon and beloved characters. Going into this episode, I was prepared for more possible stupidity, but I was not expecting over 50 minutes of mind-numbing boredom. With the exception of the last few minutes, nothing of significance occurs throughout the entire episode. It is slow, tedious, and a meandering mess. The bar was already set fairly low, but after this episode, that bar is now dragging a furrow through the ground, creating a chasm to rival the Grand Canyon. The Mandalorian is bad. Episode 3. We begin with Mando and Bo-Katan still in the mines right after they had left the water. Mando wakes up from his little swim, and Bo-Katan asks him if he saw anything while he was down there. I mentioned this in my previous episode. Despite the fact that it made no sense whatsoever for Mando to be unconscious from simply falling into the water, it was necessary so that Bo-Katan would be the only one to see the giant sea creature. This draws parallels with the first Mandalore and denotes Bo-Katan as being the chosen one who is destined to lead the Mandalorian.
Basically, kind of a big deal.
As predicted, Mando says that he didn't see anything, and also that he was very surprised that the water was a lot deeper than he was expecting. Bo-Katan tries to explain this away as damage that resulted from the Empire's attack that somehow opened up a much larger section of the cave water, but it still doesn't change the fact that Mando was completely oblivious to his surroundings, and he's a moron.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Regardless, the two make their way back to the ship and leave the planet. As they're heading back to Bo-Katan's castle, on the way, they're attacked by a small group of TIE interceptors. Bo-Katan says that she's made a lot of enemies and it's probably some warlord from the Empire, although I have a feeling it's not going to be some random person. Instead, it's going to end up being Moff Gideon himself. He was supposed to be taken to some New Republic prison after Season 2, but I somehow doubt he's going to end up staying there. But going back to those TIE interceptors, I must say that it's quite strange that they would be here because there doesn't seem to be any Star Destroyers or other carriers in the area, or even in the entire solar system. So I would have to ask, how did these TIE interceptors make it all the way here? I point this out because the writers on this series seem to have forgotten that TIE fighters, TIE interceptors, and TIE bombers are all short-range vessels. You can't use a TIE fighter to go jumping around the galaxy. They weren't built for that. They don't have even remotely enough fuel reserves to do such a thing. Those ships were designed to be launched from a carrier, engage the enemy in a local area, and then return to the carrier. So I have to ask once more, how the hell did these fighters get out here?
Excellent point.
But don't worry, it gets worse. As they're being attacked, Bo-Katan says that the shields on her ship should protect them.
What are you talking about?
For some strange reason, the writers are confusing Star Wars with Star Trek. In Star Trek, most every ship has some form of shields, from the giant battlecruisers all the way down to the single-person shuttlecraft. However, the shields in Star Wars are borderline useless. Most ships in Star Wars don't even have shields. Some of the larger fleet cruisers and carriers are equipped with them, but they still do very little to protect the ships. In Star Wars, shields that are strong enough to work as a proper defense measure require gigantic facilities and an enormous amount of energy, like what we saw on Hoth and Endor.
Target, maximum firepower.
It is true that there are some small ships in Star Wars that used shields in the past, like Naboo fighters, but those shields were only good enough to protect against small blaster fire from some of the droids. It was worthless in the ship-to-ship combat. Simply put, Bo-Katan's ship could not possibly have shields that are strong enough to deflect or absorb the TIE interceptor attacks. If you wanted to have shields that were powerful enough to do that, it would require a generator the size of a building. This show is being written by people who either don't understand Star Wars canon or are choosing to ignore it on purpose, and I don't know which one of those is worse.
This is terrible.
Regardless, they come up with a plan to deal with the interceptors and head down to the planet. As they approach Bo-Katan's castle, Mando jumps out of the ship and uses his jetpack to quickly get down to his own ship, and he manages to get inside and take off just in the nick of time. For the next several minutes, we get a fairly idiotic situation where the TIE interceptors mindlessly chase after Bo-Katan while Mando easily destroys them from behind because they don't even bother to try to deal with him. However, after the battle, another group of ships arrive, and it's a bunch of TIE bombers that quickly destroy Bo-Katan's castle. Then, an even larger group of TIE fighters and interceptors are also seen approaching. Once more, I have to point out that all of these ships are short-range vessels. It doesn't make any sense for them to be here without a carrier in orbit, which, as we can see, does not exist. Bo-Katan is mad about losing her castle, but Mando says that they need to escape because there's too many of them, and he knows a place where they can be safe, so he sends the coordinates to Bo-Katan, and they both jump into hyperspace. So far, this episode has been kinda dumb and fairly dull, but it's about to get significantly worse, because for the next 40 minutes, we're going to be following this guy.
I watch and think, who is this moron?
If you don't know who he is, don't feel bad, because I'm sure that most people probably don't either. This guy had about 5 minutes of screen time in the first season, and after the Empire fell apart, he was apprehended by the New Republic, and now he works for them. Of course, there are limitations on what he's able to do, and he's also confined to a specific area of the planet Coruscant. When we first see him in this episode, he's giving a speech to an incredibly large audience in a stadium. He talks about what he used to do in the Empire and how he was involved in researching different cloning methods. And he further explains that the Empire wanted to use all of his research for various evil things, but he had always planned to try to use his research in order to help people. Specifically, he does this because his mother died of a heart problem, and it would have been treatable if there had been organ cloning available on the planet that they were living on. But since it wasn't, his mother died, and now he has dedicated his life to making it so that other people wouldn't have to deal with that problem. Unfortunately, his speech drags on for much too long, and then after it's over, he's approached by a bunch of random people who make pointless small talk, which adds nothing to the story whatsoever, and is only there to pad out the episode length.
Get over there!
Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, we get to watch him take a 2-minute cab ride from the stadium back to his apartment, where the droid driver rambles on about different things that the Doctor should be going to visit while he's on Coruscant, and different sightseeing stuff and other nonsense. And again, it drags on for far too long and adds nothing of value and is only there to extend the length of the episode.
Get on with it!
Finally, the Doctor arrives at his apartment complex where he sees several other people wearing the same uniform that he is also forced to wear. These other people are also former members of the Empire. The Doctor says that he's new and that he just arrived from the reintegration camp.
I am a proud member of the Communist Party.
These reintegration camps are also mentioned several more times in the episode. Essentially, if any one of these former Empire members do something wrong, then they're sent to these camps as a punishment.
Now come on, China!
Now, I think that most everyone sees the Republic as being the good guys and the Empire as the bad guys, and the writers on this show, as dumb as they are, they probably see it the same way as well. But if that's the case, then it really makes me wonder about a few things because of how the writers in this show decided to portray the Republic and some of the questionable behaviors and activities that the Republic is conducting.
That's why I prefer!
Let me paint a little bit of a picture for you. In this episode, the Republic, the supposed good guys, are taking undesirable people and placing them into reintegration camps where they will have their behavior changed, and once it's modified enough, these undesirable people will be released from the special camps into a temporary workforce where they are required to wear a special uniform with a special badge that denotes them as being undesirable people. They are also stripped of their actual real names and are instead dehumanized by being referred to only with a number indicator. Also, if any of these people kind of misbehave, they will be sent back to one of these special camps.
Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way.
So just to be clear, the writers on this show believe that the correct and appropriate action to be conducted by the, quote, good guys is to take undesirable people, put them into special camps, remove their name, and force them to wear a badge. On a completely unrelated note, did you know that most of the writers who work for Disney fully support communism and all of its methods and behaviors? Now, I would say that it's awful strange that the vile behaviors of communist and socialist governments are being depicted in this episode as if they were the good guys, but I'm sure that is just purely a coincidence, and that those people would never advocate for any such things like that in the real world, right?
Well, it's tough to get any more obvious than that.
Regardless, another one of these people turns out to be someone from a previous episode as well. I only vaguely remember her. I believe she was an assistant to Moff Gideon, and of course she is one of these absurd female characters, and happens to have that ridiculous fucking haircut that all the feminist lesbians seem to have. The group makes some small talk, and the doctor says that while he doesn't miss the Empire itself, he does miss the little yellow travel rations that they used to distribute, and they're not available anymore. Later that night in his apartment, the doctor gets a knock on his door. When he goes to check, there's no one there, but there is a box full of those yellow travel rations that he had mentioned. Later, we'll learn that this was a gift from Bad Haircut Femles. At this point, I'd like to mention that we are about 20 minutes into this episode, and not a damn thing of any significance has actually happened. The following day, the doctor is at his work for the New Republic, and they have him doing some boring clerical stuff. One of his coworkers says that he watched the speech from last night, and he doesn't know why the New Republic has the doctor doing such mundane, unimportant work when he could be much more valuable conducting all the research.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
We'll find out why this is the case further on in the episode, but don't worry, it gets worse. The doctor and the Femles are out for a stroll in the city, and for some bizarre reason, the show creators decided to give these two idiots glowing CGI ice cream.
Why would they do this?
This reminds me of something that happened in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. During one of the episodes, he was at home preparing a meal, and the show creators decided for some bizarre reason that rather than having him cook real, actual soup in the pot on the stove, they would simply use CGI, and you can see here that it looked fucking awful.
I hate this. It is revolting.
There are quite a few legitimate reasons to use CGI, especially when a show is fantasy or science fiction, but I don't understand the over-heavy reliance on CGI for things that exist in the real world and would be very easy to obtain. This is a problem throughout Hollywood, but Disney in particular really has a problem with this sort of thing. Disney probably spent thousands of dollars in order to make this terrible soup CGI, when someone probably could have gone to a supermarket, bought a can of Campbell's Chunky for $1, and thrown it into a pot, and it would have looked even better.
You cadets did some sloppy work. Some damn sloppy work.
Back to this episode, you can see these characters pretending to eat the glowing CGI ice cream, but it's very obvious that they're holding some sort of little green screen prop that's being replaced with CGI, which is why they're pretending to eat it looks so unnatural and awkward.
It's just sad. It's just sad and pathetic.
They walk around for a little bit, wasting several minutes of episode time, and if you haven't guessed by now, it's pretty clear that the Femles is not being sincere with her kindness towards the doctor.
Oh no!
Honestly, it's not difficult to figure out, because the actress, even if she's trying to hide it, she has that same creepy, weirdo, insincere attitude that all of those woke weirdos seem to have, and even if they try to hide it, it always kind of oozes out of the cracks.
Maybe just 2 days in San Francisco was enough to cause mental illness.
Regardless, the next day, the doctor has a meeting with some sort of parole droid. The droid asks a series of questions like if the doctor is happy working for the New Republic and so on and so forth. The doctor says that he wants to be able to help the New Republic and that he could be a better use by using his old skills and research. However, the droid says that research on cloning has been banned by some stupid treaty or another, and therefore the Doctor won't be allowed to. After this, he goes to visit the Femles, and she says that since the Doctor is genuinely trying to help the New Republic, that he shouldn't blindly follow orders and restrictions, because that was exactly the type of behavior that got them into trouble when they were working for the Empire and led them to doing all sorts of bad things.
Do it.
She continues saying that once he has proved himself and that his research can be used for good, the New Republic will appreciate it.
Do it.
So he asks her if she could get some equipment that would help continue his research, and she says that in order to get it, they would need to go outside of the area that they're currently confined to. The Doctor immediately gets upset and changes his mind, saying that he doesn't want to ever be sent back to one of those special camps. The following day at work, the Doctor notices that the New Republic is destroying a lot of old Empire equipment and technology, even though it's still perfectly functional and could be put to good use. When he brings this up, his boss tells him that it would be far too much work and it's easier to just destroy the Empire equipment. The next scene is with the Doctor, who is once again visiting the parole droid. I can't imagine why he would ever need to see the parole droid every single day, as that seems to be a colossal waste of time, but evidently it's necessary to the story, and therefore it has to happen, no matter how ridiculous it is. At the end of the conversation, he asks the droid to confirm that helping the New Republic is the #1 goal no matter what, and the droid responds by saying yes, providing help to the New Republic supersedes everything else and all other rules.
Can you see where this is going?
This is the justification that the Doctor needs for him to continue his research, since he believes it will help the New Republic and therefore supersedes any of the other restrictions that may have been put on him. He then visits the Femles and tells her that he's changed his mind and that he will leave the confined area with her in order to get the equipment. And the next 5 minutes are spent watching these two idiots just walking over to and then sitting on a train. There are some awkward attempts at humor, but it's all very dumb and extraordinarily boring.
Give me something for the pain and let me die.
However, since they weren't supposed to leave the area, they had to sneak onto the train, and they did this by having the Femles put her foot in a little doorway gate thing, and then the two of them just walk on through.
Is that legal?
For some reason, this hyper-advanced city that acts as the hub of the galaxy and the New Republic has never bothered to install any other kind of detection or cameras of any kind to prevent this sort of thing from happening.
You serious?
What's even more ridiculous is that the Mandalorian series in the first season introduced something called a tracking fob. This is a story-destroying piece of equipment that allows a bounty hunter to track anyone, anywhere, throughout the entire galaxy.
That is an entirely implausible plot development.
We're expected to believe that this piece of equipment is commonly used by bounty hunters throughout the galaxy, and yet the New Republic doesn't have anything similar that they could use to track the former members of the Empire? Are you serious?
Right.
Even the absolute dumpster fire of She-Hulk was able to get this particular thing right when it required Abomination to wear a tracker. Regardless, these idiots sit on the train making small talk for a few minutes until eventually a few droids start walking through asking passengers for tickets, and of course they don't have any. Remember, the writers on this series are incapable of coming up with anything original or interesting, so of course they have to default to the stupid old trope of, well, we snuck onto the train and we don't have any tickets, but now they're looking for them, so we're in danger. Oh no, it's just a bunch of nonsense. This has been used so many times in the past by much better shows and movies.
Not a real train, it's a story device.
But don't worry, it gets worse. The idiots get up and they start moving to the back of the train, but one of the droid notices them and begins following. Eventually, they get to the very end of the last car, and there's nowhere to go with the droid quickly approaching. So Femles says that they need to jump off the train, and lucky for them, it just so happens to be going by a very large collection of crates that are full of cushions and padding.
It's very convenient.
Very convenient.
Why did it have to be crates full of cushions and padding? Was there a shortage on wagons full of hay? The fact that the train just so happens to luckily go by a large group of crates full of cushions at the convenient time, exactly the moment when these two idiots needed to get off the train, is contrived to the extreme. Because if these crates full of cushions had been there at any other point, it wouldn't have worked.
Things just get even more silly to the point where it's hard to tell if this is all a joke or not.
But honestly, it wouldn't even matter because that train was moving at least 50 or 60 miles an hour, probably even faster than that. And whether or not they jumped on the padded cushions, it wouldn't even matter because there is not a chance in hell that they would have landed completely unharmed, rolled off, and then got up and walked away moments later. That is not going to happen. They would have, at minimum, broken a few bones.
Oh, they're going to have to glue you back together in hell!
But don't worry, it gets worse. After nonchalantly walking away from something that definitely would have put them in the hospital, these two idiots walk up to an Imperial Star Destroyer where the doctor says, "Hey, don't we have to watch out for guards?" And then Femles says, "No, the ship is inoperable, so there's no reason to guard it."
I'm sorry. What?
Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if Star Wars was being written by people with talent. First of all, the ship is definitely not in some sort of inoperable state because we can clearly see that the lights are on and a lot of the terminals and the equipment are still powered up. Secondly, the Star Destroyer contains an absolute fortune in equipment and other materials. Remember in the awful Star Wars sequel movie where Rey Palpatine was scavenging in one of the Star Destroyers for the extremely valuable equipment? That was a Star Destroyer that had already been abandoned and had been salvaged for many, many years, and there was still valuable equipment inside. Are we supposed to believe that not a single person on this entire planet is going to attempt to steal any of the extremely valuable equipment that are currently in this Star Destroyer?
A very thorough investigation that has found no evidence of foul play.
Eventually, these two idiots make it to a medical lab in the ship, and for some strange reason, all of the equipment is untouched. Again, this is incredibly valuable and unguarded, and yet it's still here. Somehow. The doctor grabs a bunch of stuff and puts it into a case, and then the two of them leave the ship. As they're walking away, they're approached by a bunch of New Republic guards. The Femles takes all the equipment away from the doctor, and he's arrested, and it's revealed that the Femles has betrayed the doctor.
I was right. Note the lack of surprise.
He's then brought to a facility where he's going to undergo some kind of treatment that will supposedly undo the feelings and the programming that was instilled in him by the Empire. Essentially, this is a futuristic version of shock therapy, and the doctor rightly complains that this is going to be bad and the device is going to wipe his memory. One of the technicians says, no, don't worry about it. The energy levels are going to be kept really low and that he's already gone through procedure and it makes you feel really happy after it's done and there isn't going to be any negative effects. And of course, all of this is a bunch of bullshit. In the adjacent room, the Femles is with a different technician. This technician turns on the device and everyone leaves the room except for the Femles, who says that she wants to stay because the doctor was her friend or something and she wants to watch over him.
I lied.
With everyone else gone, she then does something extremely predictable and turns the machine all the way up, which causes a lot of pain to the doctor and seemingly destroys his brain. But I have to ask, how is this even possible? If the machine is meant to only be beneficial and work at low energy, then why would it even have the ability to go to such high dangerous levels? Or at a minimum, shouldn't there be some sort of limiter or a safety device on it with maybe a warning and an override or something else? But no, none of that is anywhere to be found. Instead, it's just a dial that's on the desk, and Femles is able to easily turn it all the way up to full power.
These go to 11.
What I think is going to happen with all of this stupidity is that the Femles needed to set up this situation where she's able to kind of erase most of the memory and the behavior of the doctor using the device, and then she's going to bring him to Moff Gideon, where he can once again pursue all of his research in cloning. So it's going to erase enough of his memory to kind of get rid of his personality and such, but somehow he's still going to retain all of his knowledge about how the cloning procedures work. And why would this be important? Well, because Disney has made it very clear that they want to tie in this show with the awful sequel trilogy. And they've made it, again, very clear that all of this stuff, the Obi-Wan series, Mandalorian, Boba Fett, everything leads to the sequel trilogy.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
After all, the sequel trilogy had a pretty glaring plot hole when Palpatine just reappeared out of nowhere. Essentially, what they're trying to do is retroactively fill in all of the gaps so that the sequel trilogy would make sense with Palpatine just returning out of nowhere.
Somehow do it.
And that's what's getting set up here with the Doctor, who's an expert on cloning technology, because he's going to create all of the failed clones, and then he's going to create Snoke, and then eventually he'll be able to revive Palpatine. And this is just a way of explaining all that. Regardless, we finally move back to the main character of the show, Bo-Katan, with special guest appearance by Mando. They arrive at the Mandalorian location from the first episode, which I should point out, doesn't seem to have a single trace of the giant alligator thing. When a whale washes up on a beach, that thing will be there for a very long time, weeks and months at a time. Yet for some reason, the giant alligator thing, which was there only a couple days ago, is nowhere to be seen. Not even a single morsel, not a single bone from that giant alligator thing is anywhere in this entire location. I suppose you could say that the Mandalorians got rid of it, but I think it's far more likely that the writers simply forgot.
That's what turns me on about you. Your attention to detail.
Mando hands over a sample of the water, and the armorer confirms that it is water from underneath Mandalore, and that Mando has now been redeemed. She also says that Bo-Katan has been redeemed according to the Creed. Bo-Katan says that she doesn't follow the Creed, however, the armorer says that Bo-Katan went into the water, and since she hasn't removed her helmet since that time, that means that Bo-Katan is redeemed, and she is welcome to become a member of the group. Bo-Katan can leave at any time, but until she does, she will be considered one of the Mandalorians in that group. I have to take a moment to point out that there is a pretty big problem with this whole going into the water means that you're redeemed and forgiven thing, because is there any sort of time limit on this? I mean, couldn't Mando take off his helmet again and then go back to the waters? And really, if you're standing right next to the waters, you could take off your helmet and then put it back on and go into the water and come out and you're redeemed. And then you take off your helmet and you go into the water and come out and you're redeemed. And then you take off your helmet and you go into the water and you come out and you're redeemed, right? Like, how many times can you do this? It doesn't seem to be very clear. This reminds me of the situation with the Darksaber, because in order to rightfully possess it, you have to challenge the owner, but there doesn't seem to be any rules about repeating the challenge. So you could challenge someone and then lose, and then a day later you could challenge them again and then lose and then challenge them again. So there doesn't seem to be any actual forethought put into all of these systems with the Creed and all the rules and this and that, because the writers just want certain things to happen, and even though they're ridiculous and it wouldn't actually be feasible, they just ignore it and pretend like everything is okay. Regardless, most of the Mandalorians congratulate Mando and Bo-Katan and welcome them into the group, with the exception of Blueberry, who appears to still be mad at Mando and is probably going to cause some problems in the future. This was one of the longest episodes in the entire Mandalorian series, and yet it had the least substance. Perhaps 4 or 5 minutes of actual, real, important content, combined with close to an hour of worthless padding about characters that no one cares about. Indeed, this show has set the bar to a new low standard. I can't wait to see how much farther down it will go. But thankfully, that's the end of episode 3.
I'm taking shots at the enemy. I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new rock, electronic